Shut up and sit down.
Welcome to the Health and Wealth Podcast with your hosts, Tim and Carter.
What's trending in Rutgers? Carter Wilcoxon, founder of CSI Financial Group here, with my co-host and former wealth advisor, Tim James, founder of
chemicalfreebody.com and your new health advisor. This is the show where we reveal the connection between physical and financial abundance.
Hey, hello in Rutgers. Carter Wilcoxon here with my co-host of Chemical Free Body, Mr. Tim James. Tim James, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing fantastic, buddy. The sun is out. I've got my girlfriend's birthday card almost written, and we're going to have a big party over here tonight. She doesn't know it, but we have a live band that we'll be playing.
All right.
It's going to be pretty tight.
That is awesome. So,
and I'm going to plug in and play a few songs with them.
Now, what kind of instrument, or are you singing? Are you doing?
I'll be singing and guitar, and I've never done it before. So we'll see. I might miss a few strums, but oh well. My tonality might be other, but I don't care. I always fire an aim later.
Oh, I love it. Well, if it's any consolation, we have a saying in our household. We just call these memories.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
But I have three professionals wrapped around me to make me sound pretty good. So I think we'll be all right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, speaking of professional, we are honored to have as our guest today, Mr. Audwin LeVasseur from Frederick Wealth Management. Audwin, how are you doing today, my man?
I'm doing very well. I'm going to share in the sunshine here in sunny Florida, about 80 degrees here. I'm doing all right.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, that's saying something, and I think maybe we might get into this for our enrichers who are listening today. Thank you for listening to another Health and Wealth podcast from Mr. Tim James and Carter Wilcoxon of CSI Financial Group. And we're probably going to get in a little bit about, you're doing pretty good, doing fine. I know that you have a newborn, and I want to acknowledge the fact that you are a father for the second time, this time with a baby girl.
That's all true. All very true. Yeah. It's quite the bundle of joy, with the exception of about 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. But outside of that, no, it's good time. Good time.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, hey, what we want to do is we want to go ahead and get into a little bit about your backstory. And, you've got an incredible story. And when we first started talking, which we'll get into probably in segment 2, but, your backstory and your professionalism and some of the designations that you have has been one of those things that I was super impressed with, that really sort of reinforced the direction that CSI Financial Group started going when we did get together. But if you don't mind, let's take a step back and, in your journey into the financial services arena and estate planning, and in the fact that you're a JD as well. I want to make sure we plug that also. But talk a little bit about the infancy stage of what you did in the beginning and what led you into the financial services arena with that JD designation that you have.
Well, I mean, look, there are a number of factors that kind of led to this line of work for me. I mean, you hit it on the head. I went to undergrad. I come from immigrant parents, right? Mother and father from Haiti. We had very little means growing up, but there's kind of like an old kind of Haitian cultural joke, right? Where if your kids are Haitian parents, you're either going to be a lawyer or a doctor. That's just what it is, right? So, I went through undergrad, and right after undergrad at Rutgers University, I segued right into law school. I had been aiming to go to law school for quite some time, even throughout the undergrad period. So that it wasn't, wasn't something that I selected to do because I didn't know what else to do after I graduate. I had some pretty impactful professors at the time. I had traveled a bit, both abroad, which further, I think, incited my interest in law. And so I went right for it. Thankfully, I got into a good school, and I was excited and ready to go. So went to Columbia Law School, graduated in 2004, and then jumped right into the practice, which was, exciting for me professionally. There were a lot of new things coming into work. Right? I don't have uncles and aunts or other senior family members who practiced law before me. So there was a lot of things about transitioning to what many would colloquially call as big law that I didn't know at the time. But, I looked forward to the challenge. And so I finished law school, moved to DC, and I worked at big law, right? I worked at a large law firm. There's about 300 attorneys in the building. Did a lot of discovery, was always involved in some tangent of litigation, commercial litigation, antitrust, private litigation, other types of commercial matters with insurance, et cetera. And I did that between two firms over, the course of almost 3.5 to 4 years, right? And so when I left one firm, I went to an even bigger firm. And honestly, on a side note, part of it was, so obviously it was professionally rewarding, right? To go through all that, graduate, and be able to kind of fully engage this life that I had been targeting for myself, even from a young teenage age. It was also like simultaneously gratifying for me because in 2004, I almost recall it was like days after graduated from law school, my mother was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, right? So being in a position to not only pursue my professional aspirations, but then also be in a position where I could financially give back, right, home to the person who gave everything for my brothers and I was like, an awesome feeling, right? And it was something that I was committed to doing for, as long as it takes. I mean, all my brothers, I have two older brothers, we're all close, but finally, myself being in a position where I could personally contribute home was a big deal. It had always been a big deal.
Well, if you don't mind, because, you said something right there that is very intriguing. And again, we'll get into this in segment 2 more about how we're working, together. But as a sports parent, right, I think about the many sacrifices that me and my wife, Christina, are making for our son who's pursuing, golf, and he has aspirations and everything. Talk a little bit about what it was like from your perspective and the types of sacrifices that you saw, and in hindsight, like looking back and, you're a teenager and, most teenagers, you don't think about the sacrifice your parents are making, right? But being able to reflect back now, touching on what you just got through saying, talk a little bit about what you saw in retrospect, the types of sacrifices that your parents were making for you.
I mean, it was huge, right? I mean, my parents separated and ultimately divorced. I think I was about 3 or 4 years old when it was all final. So my brothers and I were raised by my mother. She was the primary, head of the household. And she worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs, right? Sometimes nights, daytime, so we didn't have to look very hard for examples of hard work at home. All right. It was in your face. My mother, I can remember occasionally she would show us, you hold your mother's hand or whatever, you're crossing the street or whatever. Her hands were so coarse sometimes, right? It was like a man's hands, but yet it was just simply because of the amount of work that she'd been doing. I mean, she worked at a hospital for several years. She worked as a home domestic for other years, right? So this was someone who didn't even have the ability, the time to do ordinary woman upkeep things for herself, like do her nails every week, or get your hair did every 2 weeks. I mean, she was always a neat and orderly person, but little things like that I recall in my, childhood that really left the impression, right? I can probably count on one hand the number of movies my mother saw or in her whole life in the theater, or the amount of quote unquote vacations we took growing up. I mean, it was just hard work, straight business every day. She was not someone compromised getting the work done for purposes of leisure or just taking a break. She just had a serious work ethic about her. So it was just, trying to, a lot of that was, kind of rough to deal with as a kid because you had a very strong, disciplined parent, right? But on the other hand, it was, inspiring because, man, if this person is working so hard, how could you not be trying your best when you go to school and you do your homework or whatever it is that we were doing, right? So she had always been like a shining example in that regard. Frankly, not just her, but her sisters too. I mean, her aunt, my uncles, they're all kind of blue-collar, hardworking people. I'll give you one quick anecdote too. My mother passed away in 2017, but I actually still, Carter, have a number of her tax returns, and I just kept them. Right? I went through her old files and I looked at them. They were always all organized.
Right.
And I mean, 3 kids, she wasn't working with much, man. I mean, we're talking about, $13,000, $14,000 a year sometimes, and I mean, granted, I know that salary, but I don't care how you make it work. That's rough, right?
Yeah.
And granted, I know that cost of living was cheaper, back when I was a kid, but even then, I mean, we weren't working with very much.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the story of the overcoming adversity, right? And her being that example and that single mom. And, you and I, we have talked extensively, and maybe we'll get a little bit deeper into this in segment 2 again, but we've talked extensively about, single parents and the minority, that you are that environment, right? And you see that as sometimes almost like a rule. I mean, I can't even begin to understand, what that was like in the minority community, but seeing that single parent, you hear those stories over and over and over again. I think Russell Wilson, his mom, single mom. I've got another one of my financial advisors, David Nicholas. His mom was a shining example of a single mom and doing all this stuff. And when you see that type of dedication to do whatever it takes for your kids, right? And then that's how you become successful because you saw that. And talk a little bit about that community, the minority community, color people, black or brown, whatever you want to call it. That environment is so fraught with horrible, devastating things that happens to families. And was that a part of the emphasis on why you sort of got into estate planning? And again, we just talked about this fairly recently. Can you touch on a little bit about that, on how you want to have a better future for your family and not have to have them go through the things that you saw growing up?
Yeah. So look, I think the dynamic that was present in my home growing up was a common experience, right? For many families that look like mine who had certain income levels of what I was used to growing up, right? Not just neighbors, friends, I mean, other cousins, family, right? So this was a common experience. And there are lots of socioeconomic factors that lead to that. I don't think that's worth, speculating or breaking down. But it's not a secret to say that there are many minority Black households that are single parent headed, right? I mean, we probably have the highest rate of single parent headed households in any other demographic. And consequently, what that means for the family could be a lot of things, right? The absence of a father figure, the limited income of the single parent, the subsequent maybe lack of kind of parental and wraparound resources that are available when you're raising kids that may not have been available for folks who come from my background in light of, the limited resources and help we had growing up. For me, I got a little bit lucky because, I had a lot of, neighbors, families, friends, for every sport that I played, there was always a coach who extended himself, who would pick me up from practice or take me back home and almost treated me like their own kid. So this is, notwithstanding certain outliers like that, or people who kind of really go out there and extend themselves for you. I mean, it's a frequent experience in the African American community, and it's something that we've been coping with, for several decades now, right? And I looked this back really quick, right? So there were always issues in law that I had passion about, but in retrospect, looking back, I think, Carter, I was more excited about being able to provide financial support and stability to my home than I was interested in the actual practice. Law was my vehicle for bringing money home.
Sure.
As I got older in the practice, and as I, witnessed certain limitations or that come with, the grind of law practice, as I learned, as I helped various other clients come from a cross, number of multiple of industries in real estate, small business owners. And I came to actually witness multiple examples of people who had similar ambitions like I would. You want to do the best or take care of your family, but they did it in other creative ways that they could get passive income, ways that they could, really sustain a vibrant family life without necessarily, grinding with sort of billable hour model, right? So I think that exposure over time led me to, look for other work, other industry, and other ways where I could kind of be this kind of financial support for the people that I love day in and day out.
Well, Audwin, I think that's a really cool story. It's really hitting home for me because I did have a dual parent family, but I grew up really poor, and I know what it's like. You got holes in your pants, and you just, there's just not a lot of money. You want certain things, and you want the nice baseball mitt, and you get the one at the garage sale. You make the best of it, right? And it's like a lot of people wonder where I get all my drive, and I'm like, well, it came from my childhood. It just, if we wouldn't have had those experiences, we probably wouldn't have half the drive we have today. So it was a gift that was given to us, right? An absolute gift.
And I agree. And frankly, in the moment, you don't know what you're missing, right? This is just life the way that it is, right? I didn't really come to be aware of what, of how much we didn't know until much later, right? In life. And when we talk about, the financial service industries and the number of things that are out there that, families of different asset classes could use, or the utility of smart estate planning and how that could bolster, generational wealth if leveraged and pursued strategically with a level of serious intentionalism. I mean, those are kind of breakthrough tidbits of information that I learned long after the fact, right? But no, I agree with you. In the moment, it's what makes it. It's what drives it, right? And I don't think I would have had that work ethic, even practice, had it not been for my upbringing in the first place. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, we're going to take a quick break. When we get back, we're going to get into why Audwin decided to hook up with CSI Financial, president of a wealth management company. He's got a law degree. Why would he want to work with CSI Financial when we get back?
Are you concerned about being able to get all of your affairs in order during this trying time? Are you troubled by what would happen if you ever became incapacitated? Maybe you've been procrastinating in the past to address these issues, but now, more than ever before, you know just how important it is to get everything documented. Well, don't worry, because we can get you taken care of right from the comfort of your own home. Welcome to the revolutionary My Life Card Plan estate plan processing platform, home of the last estate plan you'll ever need. We are very pleased you are here, and rest assured, we can offer you a complete estate planning experience regardless of where in the 50 states you may live. Our unique transformational system combines efficiency, convenience, and professional support at levels you never thought possible for setting up your estate plan. Moreover, we will provide you with powerful, user-friendly dynamics that put you in total control of your plan throughout your lifetime. Call us today at 888-316-6040 or go to www.csifinancialgroup.com, and our team of specialists will be there to assist you every step of the way.
What's up, Enrichers? Tim James here with my co-host Carter Wilcox, and we're back with President of Frederick Wealth Management, Audwin LeVasseur. Hey, Audwin, thanks for being on. Let's go ahead and get into this. How did you meet Carter, and how did you get involved with CSI Financial, and what's that been doing for your business?
So, look, I have, I'm always networking, right? I think that when you're in this industry, it's important to try to develop relationships, frankly, in any industry. That has always been kind of a natural professional tendency of mine, to network and see who I can work with, who I can help deliver services to customers and clients at a greater level, at a more effective level, et cetera. Getting to the point, through the network, through the process of networking, somehow I got landed, and I met Carter at CSI. And one thing about Carter is that he's definitely never short of enthusiasm, right? Right. Which frankly, when you're in sales, you need that. You need someone who's like, yeah, go get it, right? You need your Wolf of Wall Street, right? On the one hand, but on the other hand, there's a lot of utility that and just tactical things that Carter was, I guess, maybe just even from personal experiences or through his own professional experience. Carter was acutely aware of general impediments that advisors, wealth managers may encounter when engaging in this line of work. And he has, this kind of inexhaustible mindset of trying to figure out how do we get around some of those hurdles so that we can touch and change and affect more lives in the work that we do, right? And so, as I've come to know more about CSI and how they work, they're immediately revealed to be a number of cool stuff, man. I'm sorry, I'm not the most eloquent guy on a Friday, but just a bunch of really cool, smart things that he put in place to really help the advisors do what they do. And look, I have existing relationships with other financial groups, other IMOs. They're really good people. And I'm not throwing any shade on anyone. I definitely think Carter and I connected because he and I had a very similar mindset. His work ethic also was just, second to none. And there are just tools. There are things that are offered at CSI that are just not offered anywhere else. We can get into that if you want, but that's really what really triggered the moment.
Well, actually, let's get into a little bit of that foundational approach and the fact that, because I kind of sort of want to pivot into, specifically what we were talking about the other day and what you just sort of touched on with generational wealth and the fact that in the minority community, it's like, and we can talk a little bit about Art Still and that podcast that I shared with you about how it's as if what ends up happening all too often, the wealth gap between, the white community, if you will, right, and the Black community and people of color tends to be because of the lack of generational wealth planning, or what we have now started coining as family succession planning, and how that can determine the future generations, right, that you can either adversely affect or proactively benefit by having this foundational approach that we call estate planning, which is, that terminology gets thrown around, and, what does that really mean? And we try to sort of dissect and sort of simplify what that really means, which is why we talk about family succession planning. Let's talk specifically the connectivity of not only the process that we have refined and developed, where we use the estate plan portfolio in helping that any, household, regardless of, their demographic, whatever that might be, but also specifically on that podcast that I share with you with Art Still, and how you can potentially benefit that generate and those generations in the community that you're serving on a regular basis. Talk a little bit about how those connected pieces really can help to positively affect that demographic.
Now look, so you're touching upon some big issues and some deep issues. Here's how I see it, right? I'm an African American male, and statistically speaking, right, I have a higher rate of heart disease, higher rate of high blood pressure, higher rate of stress. I have a faster rate of mortality. Pretty much the majority of reasons for why humans die in the U.S., right? African American males particularly, but African Americans generally have demographic, have higher rates of mortality in a number of different health spheres. And there are a lot of reasons for it, right? So when you talk about the seriousness of discussions of our mortality, right? And then you juxtapose that also with considerations that look, African Americans communities generally, statistically anyway, inherit proportionally the least amount of generational asset giving than any other demographic in the US, right? And when you add to the fact that generally the US population is only like 60 to 65% of US families in general that have a will or estate plan at all, right? So there's a big need there. But in minority communities, particularly in African American communities, less than 50% of these families also have some sort of will or estate plan together. So in totality, when you put that all together, we die the fastest, or we're most likely to die, where we statistically are still earning the least, we're inheriting the least, we're transferring the least. You would think that, man, like the pandemic has been going on in this community for quite some time, right? And this is, I mean, COVID-19 is like the cherry on the cake. By the way, COVID statistics, what do you find, right? The higher rates of exposure were between Latin American and African American communities. And maybe not so coincidentally, the rate of vaccination currently happens disproportionately least for African Americans and Latino families generally. Now, again, there are a lot of reasons why these statistics are so terrible. But my mindset is like, look, if we're living in these kind of conditions, then there is like almost a heightened need to be prepared, right? So, and regardless of the asset level. And then when you add on other things about the number of single-headed families and the almost cultural way that often Latin American and African Americans have like a reliance on sort of intergenerational type of living situations, right? In many respects, all we have is each other. And so what could we do today? What could we do now to help bolster or change some of these dynamics, right? Some of those questions are very hard questions. Some of them require lots of big stuff to happen. But on a family-based level, what can be done, in my view, is that regardless of your asset level, we could create an estate plan for ourselves, right? We could, whether it's, $5 or 5 cents, right? 500,000, right? We could create opportunities for us to devise an estate plan so that we can efficiently transfer whatever we have from one generation to the next, right? Comfortably and historically, African Americans tend to view life insurance, for instance, as a tool to help pay for funeral costs, not necessarily as a tool to help foster or generate intergenerational wealth, right? And that's a big difference.
Yep. Because
when you talk to a number of the clients that we work with, particularly with some of the other financial groups that I'm involved with, the non-African American clients, they're using life insurance as a tool for non-taxable income, right? They're using it as a tool for effectuating a legacy to their next of kin, or to their grandchildren, or their children's children's children.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think some of this requires a bit of education and a lot of advocacy, right? To say that there are things out there that we can do now, that we can put in place now, that could, help the next generation, right? And that's not a big sell for African Americans, right? I mean, we have a legacy of looking out for the next generation. We have a legacy of standing on the shoulders of the person behind us to go from A to B, right? This is just an area, I think, where there's just not a lot of activity, and there's not a lot of education in this regard about how these resources can be leveraged, right? I mean, we talked about before how a lot of folks think that historically think that trusts are for the wealthy, right? When in reality, they could fit and are probably very essential for even those who have just a single asset like a home, right? And to allow, using trust just to enable efficient dissemination of that asset all by itself. I mean, there are a lot of things. There are a lot of tools out there that I think the community needs, and I think that the community can leverage. And this has really become a significant part of my work, almost to redefine what estate planning can mean in communities of color, and really try to highlight or provide education and advocacy in spaces and places where we come to realize that there is a lot more that we can do given the plight of our condition, and frankly that our plight of our condition warrants that we do more.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, I think that what you're bringing here is awareness, and that's number one. People have to have awareness, and they have to be educated. And then the third thing is they need a plan. They definitely need a plan. And it sounds like that's what you're doing over there as you're helping people. You're bringing the awareness, you're bringing the education, and you're bringing the plan. So that's really cool. So we're taking a quick break. And when we get back, we're going to ask Audwin, or he's going to ask me any questions he has about health. So I would like it if you would speak to that about the COVID rates in the African community. We'll talk about that when we get right back.
You want the absolute best for yourself, and you want it to be easy. That's why we created Green 85. It helps with detoxifying the body gently. We're proud it's chemical-free, unlike almost all other supplements you'll find. Bottom line, Green 85 will get you healthier. We look forward to hearing what Green 85 did for you.
To get this product and our other amazing products, go to chemicalfreebody.com. That's chemicalfreebody.com. Welcome back, Enrichers. Tim James here with my co-host Carter Wilcoxon in the house. We've got Audwin LeVasseur, president of Frederick Wealth Management, and you guys have had a really interesting conversation. I'm just sitting here like taking notes in my mind, actually writing some notes down too. I feel like connected with Audwin because of his backstory. Like I said, I grew up poor, but my dad was gone paving in the summertime in the highway department. So I didn't even see him that much. He was gone. It was just me and my mom all week. So I get that. But now it's time to flip the script on the wealth management, the succession planning, the family succession planning. Audwin, you get to just freestyle, ask me any questions you have about your health, your family's health, anything like that.
Well, I think that what has come across for many clients, I certainly have lots of clients and even colleagues who either had COVID-19 or know someone who did.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And many of them, even after they've had it, still kind of feel some lingering effects. And I was just curious as to what type of, what type of lifestyle? Should COVID be a catalyst for a lifestyle change in diet, or does someone just think that you're just unlucky and you're glad that you survived it and you go about your life as it were? What do you recommend in terms of maintaining your health as best as you can post-COVID?
Awesome. Okay, so post-COVID, first off, we have to understand that the solution to all this, whether your skin's white, black, brown, blue, green, it doesn't matter. We're all human beings. We all have red blood cells, right? So the conversation needs to be about how do we as human beings boost our immune system, right? COVID is a virus. Our bodies, people forget that our bodies are 380 trillion virus cells, 60 trillion bacterial cells, and only 6 trillion human cells. So we're more viruses than bacteria. Why are we running from the virus? Why are we so scared about this? Well, it's because there's fear mongering. The mainstream media and the people that are in control are in control of a broken system. So we have to look at the big picture. We have to step back and not look at the emotional sides, left versus right, white versus black. You've got anti-vax versus pro-vaccine, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, right? So all these situations are put together to get us to fight against each other. It's called divide and conquer. All right. So we need to be clear about that. Now, first off, African Americans and people of color have darker skins. So what that means is that your ancestors grew up where there was a lot of sunshine. Okay. It's just that simple. So your body naturally got darker and darker and darker to protect itself from the UVB, UVA radiation that's coming down, right? So you need a lot more exposure to get the necessary vitamin D from the sun. Vitamin D is not necessarily a vitamin. It's actually a hormone, okay? And it's responsible for about 5% of everything that happens in your body. So one thing that vitamin D does very well is it actually destroys the sheathing of viruses. Think of it like bullets, like a machine gun, just like shooting the holes in these viruses. That's why, over 70% of people in America are vitamin D deficient. Why? Well, we don't, above the 45th parallel, we don't get, there's winter, and it gets cold. So people from, let's say, from Africa or from Jamaica or Haiti, they move to America and they're in Chicago. They're not going to get enough vitamin D. They need somebody with dark skin like you is probably going to need 5 to 7 hours of sunshine to get the necessary amounts of vitamin D that your body needs to shoot holes in viruses. Where I can go outside, I'm lighter skinned because maybe my ancestors were from Sweden, and it was cold, so my skin's lighter because we didn't have as much sunshine. So I don't need to be as exposed as much. But the downside is if I get too much, my skin's going to burn. I'm going to get a sunburn where you're protected. You see. So it's really our environment. So boosting the immune system, that's why it's so important. The conversation really needs to be not to be scared of COVID and putting on masks and running around doing all this foolish stuff that's going to lower your immune system, but to boost the immune system. High amounts of green leafy vegetables has vitamin A in it. This is also antiviral. Vitamin D, supplementing with vitamin D3. One of our products, Carter takes it, our Green 85 juice from it. We have 1,000 international units of vitamin D3 in there that are naturally occurring every time you take a scoop. Okay, this is going to give your body what it needs to shoot the holes in the virus. Zinc, very important. Zinc actually, once it gets into the cell, can stop the virus from replicating. That's why you've probably seen on the news, they talked about hydroxychloroquine and zinc, but then now it's all been suppressed. I don't know if you remember, all those doctors went on the Supreme Courthouse steps and they were all in their white coats and stethoscopes. They said, look, we're having 100% success rate with hydroxychloroquine and zinc, hydroxychloroquine and zinc, over and over again. 94-year-old man healed of COVID, hydroxychloroquine and zinc. Well, why'd they take that down on Facebook and block all that stuff? Because there's no money in hydroxychloroquine. It's an old-ass drug. It's like 68 years old, so it's generic now. It's like $200. It doesn't cost that much. You know, you could just pay for it out of pocket or insurance covers it. It's nothing. And then you take some zinc with it. What also in nature has zinc? Plants. Mung beans are riddled with zinc. Riddled with zinc. Not only are they good for stopping viruses from replicating, but they're good for prostate issues for men. So what the problem is we're detached from nature. In the inner cities, especially with the African-American community, you guys have a hard access to fresh produce. This is the problem. You're detached from nature. You're walking around on it's the concrete jungle, right? They have lots of cigar stores and places to get beer and booze and liquor stores and convenience stores that have garbage in them. There's no food. It's all processed. It's a bunch of crap. That's the problem. The African-American community, the Hispanic community, the Asian community, the white community, all of us, if you change our environment and you give us a lack of sunshine, in your case, if you give us crappy foods, if you give us no fresh foods, and you promote cigarettes and booze and liquor, well, of course, the body's going to break down, and that's what's going to happen. So what we really need to do is we need to get fresh foods up into the inner cities. That's what we need. And sprouting is the solution, because people can order seeds, you can ship them in, and you can start sprouting seeds directly on your countertop in the window, like literally. And you can have foods that are 10, 20, 30 times more nutritious than fresh picked vegetables out of your garden. That's a lot. Like, that's a tremendous amount. So one handful of like sunflower sprouts or alfalfa sprouts would be equivalent to eating 10 to 30 handfuls of fresh cut kale out of a garden. Now, if you live in a little condo or you're in a city in an apartment and you don't have a garden, well, guess what? You can garden in your house. You can have little fresh herbs and basils and thyme and oregano. Those can be growing all the time. And then you can start sprouting in glass jars. And restaurants are throwing away gallon jars for free because they fill them up with pickles, and they use the pickles and they toss the jar. You can get this stuff for free. Seeds are cheap. Like, this is medicine. Remember the father of medicine, Hippocrates, he said, let thy food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food, right? So all we really need to do for all humans is get them access to clean air, clean water, clean, fresh food. And you'd be surprised how fast people can boost their immune system.
Awesome. There's a lot of food for thought there.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Yeah.
Right. This segues to a second question.
Okay.
So we were talking about post-COVID. Let's talk about a little bit about
you did say post-COVID. People dealing with stuff afterwards. I just had on my podcast this morning, it's going to air in a couple weeks, Dr. Anna Maria Clement. She said they've had fantastic results with people, obviously all the stuff I just talked about, healthy foods and all that kind of stuff. But if they have that problem where they can't smell or taste anything after COVID, get them into a hyperbaric oxygen chamber 3 days a week, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and keep doing that until the taste buds and the smell comes back. And they're having a tremendous amount of success with that. And hyperbaric oxygen is it's basically hyperbaric oxygen. It's like, when people would go diving and they get the bends because they came up too fast, they'd put them in there. It's what it does. It infuses your body with oxygen, and we're definitely needing that today. So that's a solution for that.
Fantastic. Related question, and it's kind of loops back into the estate planning piece too. is there is, I mean, there's been reports written about this, studies written about this, right? And so in many times in African American communities, particularly after the, all that historical stuff related to the experiments done at Tuskegee,
right,
et cetera, there is a general, I won't say general, but there is some reticence. There's some reticence in the community about actually going forward and taking the vaccines. There's reticence in the community about the healthcare system in general, right? I mean, this in many respects, and there's articles about this, about why many African Americans don't even necessarily have a healthcare directive, and it's not because we don't necessarily believe in preparedness, but there is a kind of a distrust as to what the healthcare industry would recommend or prescribe what needs to be done in the event of some, serious or egregious medical event, right? Mm-hmm. So, would you recommend persons today to take the vaccine if it's available? I have a lot of colleagues or a lot of friends that say I'd rather hold out for a little while and see how it all goes, and then I'll sign up, right? What are your thoughts?
Well, the first thing is that right now, hopefully, we still have a free country, or we're under the illusion of that. But everybody can. If you want to go get a shot, knock yourself out, that's fine. But for me, I like looking at things as they are. I take off the rose-colored glasses, and I want to look at things based on the scientific method. What I would point you and the rest of the community to, the African-American community, is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. So this is another person of color. He came from India in a caste society, a very racist place, and came over here and invented email when he was 14, went to MIT and got 4 degrees at MIT. One of them is in biological engineering. So he's one of the top immune system experts on the world from an engineering standpoint. This is the difference. Engineers can't make mistakes. If they build a bridge and screw it up, people die. When they build an airplane, they cannot make mistakes or people die. So what he's done is he's taken an engineering approach to the modern immune system. In fact, he actually just did the prestige lecture at the National Scientist Institute in 2019 on the modern immune system. Dr. Fauci and our current medical community is, and these inoculations in Western medicine is based on an antiquated 100-year model of our immune system, the innate immune system and the adaptive. Those are 2 components. But what Dr. Shiva brought in was that there's the interferon system that wants and desires viruses and bacteria to come in to build resilience and strength into the body so that our body can naturally make its own defenses. That's called natural herd immunity. That's called boosting your immune system. So we need this stuff. Number 4 was the gut biome, or the microbiome, those 60 billion bacterial cells, and the brain. So there's these 5 components, and he went into detail. And what Dr. Shiva said is that we just need to look at the science of it. So if people want to, they can just go to VA Shiva, that's Victory America Shiva, SHIVA.com/vaccines. And you can watch the top immune system expert on the world explaining vaccines, not from a right or left, not from a pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine standpoint, but let's just look at things how they really are and use an engineering standpoint to these vaccines and the immune system. And also, a lot of it's just common sense at that point. And what I mean is that the scientific method, not checkbook science where you're paying some, scientific organization a huge grant, and then you get what's called scientific consensus, because you get all these people, they're getting millions of dollars to study certain things, but they're really never getting anything done. This is the problem for not just the African American community, but for all Americans, is that our scientific community is now become the oldest profession in the world. They're prostitutes. They take the money for the grants to go study things that the people giving them the grants want them to study, and they're doing this scientific consensus thing that a bunch of them say, oh yeah, we need to do this. That's the way to do it. And then we're supposed to just go along with it, but it's not based in fact. And all people have to do is look around. How healthy is your community? How's it working for you? We spend $3.3 trillion on healthcare, yet we're ranked 38th to 42nd in the world, and we take more meds than everybody. The system is broken. It's very clear. And the way to take it back is people have to take responsibility for themselves and their health and not listen to politicians and, and corrupt people that, celebrities and billionaires and people that are, like Bill Gates. I mean, this guy, like software. Now he's supposedly the vaccine guru, and he wants to plunge needles into everybody's arm in the world. He's over in India. He paralyzed like 400,000 girls with some shots, like paralyzed them. Right. That's not going to be in the mainstream media because they're all in cahoots together. So would I get the vaccine? That's not going to happen. I don't get sick. I'm not worried about it. If I was to get COVID, I would just up my vitamin A, my vitamin D, my zinc, and D3. If things got really, really bad, we could do what Dr. Ryan Pageant did up in Seattle early last year. He's a medical doctor up in Seattle treating elderly COVID patients. He picked up COVID himself. And this wasn't some lightweight either. This is like a 6'4" former football star at Northwestern University. This is a big dude. He's, 42, 43 years old. He's like, I wasn't expecting to get sick. He got COVID. What they do, they put him on a ventilator. And then as soon as he's on the ventilator, of course, ventilators are stupid to put people on with COVID because your lungs are already filled up with fluid. And you're basically exploding their lungs. 88% of people putting on a ventilator. The ventilator is what's killing people. But regardless of that, as soon as he was on the ventilator, his kidneys and his heart, everything was failing. And in the last ditch effort, his friends at the doctor's office there said, well, we're going to try this crazy experimental treatment. And they put him on an immunosuppressant drug and what? A high dose vitamin C IV. And he healed. So we have mainstream media, the Los Angeles Times leaked that story and they put it in there, high dose vitamin C IV. So all the hospitals, all they would have to do is they already know how to give people IVs. We could just have vitamin C ready for acute situations. And for everybody else, eat a lot of green leafy vegetables, get outside and get the sunshine, have a good time with your friends, take vitamin D, supplement with it, eat lots of mung beans, get lots of zinc in your diet. And then you'll probably be okay, right? Your body's going to handle itself. So that would be my answer to your question.
Yeah. Now talk about a lot of food for thought right there. Right. So, hey, Enrichers, what we want to definitely do, and Tim, I know that since you brought up Dr. Shiva, let's make sure that we've got access to that so people can go and make their own educated decision, right?
Yeah.
So, all you can do is learn as much as you can. You can read, and then, we're smart enough as Americans to disseminate the information. I'm a firm believer in that. So, let's make sure that we get that resource out for those enrichers that are interested in what you were just talking about and going to Dr.
Yeah.
Right, so that they can then make that educated decision for them and their families.
Yeah, I think it's really important today that we drop all of our emotions, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you're pro-mask, anti-mask, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine. Let's just drop all that and let's look at things as they really are from an engineering standpoint. And Dr. Shiva is the one guy that I've seen that's actually bringing the true science to it. And the guy's super healthy himself. That's another thing. I only take advice from people that are super healthy, that have the success in their own life. How in the world could these unhealthy politicians be passing laws that affect my relationship with my doctor or your relationship, Audwin, with your doctor? They shouldn't be doing it. Government needs to get out of the relationship between doctor-patient, and people really need to really make themselves their own doctor. That's what it really boils down to. In fact, Ann Wigmore, who started the Hippocrates Health Institute, wrote a book called Be Your Own Doctor, right? A very important thing to do. And we forget that we instinctively know what to do. We just got to get plugged back into nature. We got to get all this man-made toxins out of our gut, out of our blood and our fat and our muscle tissue, eat lots of fresh living foods, pure water, clean air. And the human body is very resilient. It will come back. It definitely will.
Awesome. So, hey, Enrichers, we really thank you for staying on for our third segment. I want to thank again President of Frederick Wealth Management, Audwin LeVasseur, a close personal friend of mine now that we have been working together for. Audwin, what's it been? Almost a year?
Yeah,
almost
a year, and it's been exciting. I mean, being able to connect, families to a comprehensive set of resources from from the nuts and bolts of estate planning to, whatever, sort of asset vehicles that can help bolster their livelihood. It's been a very positive and very unique experience for me and a lot of the clients and communities of color I work with.
Audwin, can you share, before I go, one of your most recent client testimonies that a client came to you and said, "Oh my God," and it was something that you got from CSI Financial that you were able to use that tool and that toolkit and help a client that they said, "Wow, thank you so much"?
Yeah, I mean, there are several examples, right? So here's one that comes to mind. Actually, I can think of two, but here's one particular. We have a client. Gentleman is elderman. I mean, he's like 97, 98 years old. Former military guy. He's done really well in his life, both in the military and after the military. His wife passed away. Right. He's got two daughters. The daughters are in their 60s. One's like 61 or 62. The other one's 65. One of the daughters has 4 grandchildren. The other one has no kids at all. I mean, I'm sorry. One of the daughters has 4 kids. The other one doesn't have kids at all. And look, he's thinking about his estate plan, right? One of the daughters lives in New York with him. Another one lives in Tennessee. One of the grandkids is in DC. Another one's in Tennessee. And, he's not that most mobile guy either, right? Because he's 90, 97, 98 years old, right? So, but still, very lucid, very communicative, but, he's not out there, playing tennis anymore, right? So, he wanted to create an estate plan, and he has assets roughly ranging at about 1.5, 1.6 total when you include his houses and his brokerage accounts and things like that. But here's the scenario, right? All his grandkids are in their 20s. His daughters, one's married, possibly divorcing, the other one has a living boyfriend, not married at all. And, he's thinking, look, I want to leave my assets to my grandkids and my daughters because they're the pearls of my life. But I want to do this in a responsible way. I mean, he has been working with a financial advisor the last 30-something years, but, none of his kids were as, involved in the market or creating a brokerage account or basically as savvy with their finances as he is. So he's happy to leave a legacy to his family, but he wants his assets to be distributed in a strategic and impactful way. Right. So one thing he wanted to do, he wanted to leave about $100,000 to each of his grandkids. Right. But he doesn't want to do that when they're age 20, because you give a 21 or 22-year-old kid their $100,000, that may not last very long. Right. So this is kind of one of the things he does. He creates a revocable living trust for himself, and he creates, different sub-trusts for each of his grandkids. And then he tells them, look, upon my passing, there's $100,000 there for you. But, you're only entitled while in your 20s to get 10% of that inheritance every year up until your age 30. When you're age 30, you can inherit it all. But up until that time, it only comes in 10% increments, right? So that's kind of his way of stemming how much goes to each kid at a given period of time. The other thing he does is he says, look, I've worked with a financial advisor the last 30 years of my life, so you guys are going to work with one too. So as a condition also of earning your 10%, every quarter you're going to have to meet up with a financial advisor, preferably my guy, he says, but you can find your own. The trustee is going to monitor this, and you're going to have financial education courses, or at least a consultation with this guy every quarter. And he's going to tell you about whatever is on his agenda that day, or whatever questions that you have about, or maybe he'll tell you about my estate and how my investments are doing at that time. But he was hoping that in that cyclical exposure to the financial education particularly with the guy that he's trusted with his own money for 30 years, that they can over time learn and develop habits that he did, throughout their lifetime. None of his grandkids majored in finance. None of them are accountants. So in his mind, he thought this financial education certainly wouldn't be duplicative of the, of what they had already learned in school. So that's kind of what he did for the grandkids. Now, he's also thinking too, well, if one of my daughters gets a divorce, I don't want the divorcing spouse to get a piece of my money. That's family money, right? Mm-hmm. So he uses the trust options to kind of insulate the inheritance that are designated for his daughters, and it's maintained in a trust so that if the daughter in fact goes through a divorce, this part of her asset pool isn't considered a marital asset or commingled with the other marital assets, so that in the event she divorces, the ex-husband doesn't get money, his hands on house money, so to speak. Right.
Right.
And the same benefit that goes with this wife also works well with the other daughter who has a live-in boyfriend. Right. He doesn't. I mean, he likes the guy, but he doesn't know, what's this guy's intentions or if they commingle assets or accounts right now, even if they're not married. So his directives that he put in his trust insulated his other daughter's money away also from the boyfriend. So in many respects, he positioned himself to dictate who gets their money, when they get it, how they get it. He put provisions in there as to sort of mutual agreements that had to be met between the two daughters if they're opting to sell any of their houses. He put a sort of a neutral trustee in place so that one daughter doesn't feel more pressure than the other to leverage the existing inheritance upon his passing. And he did this from home. He didn't have to go to a doctor. He didn't have to drive to the lawyer's office. He didn't have to, have multiple conversations with his financial advisor and his lawyer and get multiple different bills for different things at all the different times because of what was offered at CSI, because of our process that we've created. He was able to create a trust for his family, not go anywhere, deal with the financial issues, and it all cost him significantly less than if he were to do this, the old-fashioned way, right? And frankly, he was able to get everyone on board, even if he's living in Rochester, New York, and the other kids are in Tennessee. And because he's using a web-based platform, everyone can log in, can see what he did, right? And he can amend it if he wanted. So this is kind of kind of speaks to the utility, right, of the estate planning, platform that we create, where the client can get into serious discussions not only about the assets that they have, how they should be transferred, or what asset vehicle they could be repositioned to for overall tax benefit or overall financial benefit, but then on the legal side, he was able to protect his assets for the benefit of his family without incurring, a $5,000-$10,000 bill from attorney. No disrespect to attorneys, but I know how billing can happen. And he was able to do it, fairly efficiently, within one or two client meetings in less than 90 minutes, it was done. And I mean, this could have worked for him, whether he lived in New York or Hawaii or Florida or wherever. I have a client just recently. He actually lives in China. The U.S. citizen lives in China. He's got a Chinese wife, but he's got a brokerage account here in the U.S. So he created a trust for purposes of assigning his assets here in the U.S. So in the event something happened to him in China, he's got a stored of his money here in the U.S. that will handle his affairs in the way that he directs them to be handled, notwithstanding what may be the case under Chinese.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that story. That's a pretty powerful story. Like actually you painting every individual aspect of it. That I think that really, number one, people in general don't know that you can do that kind of stuff. Number two, a lot of financial advisors would probably like to do it, but they don't know how, or they're just not doing it. There's no awareness. But by doing that, not only are you really, really helping the client, but your business is the guy's not going to leave you. He's gonna, send people to you. You're going to get a lot more referrals. So thank you for sharing that, man. That was just really awesome stuff. So Carter, I guess that's it, man. Can you take us out?
Yeah, I'll absolutely take you out. And I just want to say, first of all, that Audwin, it's been an absolute pleasure being able to have you be part of the stable of advisor partners that we have here. It's been a great relationship. Obviously, we try to bring value every single chance we get, and I am a firm believer in say what you mean and mean what you say. And hopefully we continue to deliver on that for you to help you ultimately grow your practice. I know you talked a little bit about it early on and everything, but let's just leave the enrichers with one thing. If you want to learn a little bit more about your own practice and what we've brought to you, what is your website if you want to talk a little bit about that, and then we'll let everybody get going.
Look, you can find out about what we do and how we do it at www.frederickwealthmanagement.com. There's a context links page there. You can freely submit an email or with any question or concern. Either myself or one of my colleagues will get back to you certainly within 24 hours. Also on the site, there's a number of videos that talk about different financial products and strategies that one can do with their retirement assets. And there's an events page on there where you can register and listen to a seminar on estate planning, where we get into different kind of life scenarios that happen to ordinary people and about how strategic and efficient use of our platform, frankly, can enable you to protect your assets and make sure that they're handled and conveyed and transferred in a way that you prefer, that hopefully supports you and your family for the long term.
Awesome. Audwin, thank you again so much. Enrichers, thank you again for listening to this very wonderful podcast. And make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. And also make sure to check out the healthandwealthpodcastshow.com to learn more and hear more about how we can help you grow your practice and get those nice flat bellies and fat wallets. For my co-host, Mr. Tim James of Chemical Free Body, I'm Carter Wilcoxon, CEO and founder of CSI Financial Group, wishing you a wonderful day and a happy weekend if it is a weekend for you like it is for us. So, Audwin, thank you again for being on here. Everybody have a great weekend and a great day. Hey, Enrichers, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Health and Wealth Podcast. I'm your host, Carter Wilcoxon.
And I'm your host, Tim James. And by God, we are committed to helping you guys have fat wallets, flat bellies. So tune in again for another episode and make sure to like, share, and drink a lot of water.
Or beer.
You have just listened to the Health and Wealth Podcast with Carter and Tim.